All right, and we are live.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and happy Thursday in April. I think I heard on the radio it's National or Boston-based Kindness Day. So I encourage you for a small act of kindness. And already Janine has demonstrated that this morning, making sure that we're all set as she does every single meeting. So thank you, Janine, for kicking off the day. I'm joined here, Valerie Sullivan, Chair. I'm joined here with Bobby Kaplan, Tim Sullivan, Christy Clenard, Gerzino Gerard, Joe Gentile, Melissa Murphy Rodriguez, Tamara Davis, Eileen McEnany, Jane Edmonds, Toby Choate, Elizabeth Shabbat, Anna Seneko, Rebecca Butler from the Division of Insurance, and Cassandra Roeder from A&F. Andrew, did I miss anybody?
I don't believe so.
So welcome, commissioners, and thank you for your service. At this point, I want to open up the meeting and see if we have any discussion around the minutes from the last meeting. So then I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Moved.
Seconded.
Okay, so for roll call, I will pass this over to Andrew, our general counsel. For me, Andrew, I vote yay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vice Chair Kaplan,
Yay.
Designee Roeder,
Yay.
Designee Butler,
Yay.
Commissioner Shabbat,
Yay.
Commissioner Chapdelaine,
You missed me in the intro, but I'm here, and yes.
In the framework, that chart
I
of
apologize, Commissioner Choate,
microaggressions.
Yes.
Like
Commissioner Clenard,
reframe. So I'm just
Aye.
going 5
Commissioner Davis,
fewer
Aye.
and just make the.
Commissioner Gerard,
I see what you're saying.
Durand, I'm sorry,
See.
Gerzino,
Yay.
We got.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Yay.
Yeah, that's a good one. People
Commissioner Gentile,
Yes.
Commissioner McEnany,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy Rodriguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Senenko,
Yay.
and Commissioner Sullivan.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you, Andrew. And Adam Chapdelaine, I'm sorry, you must have snuck on before I had a chance to write you down. So welcome, Adam. It's your meeting, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. We have a fairly light agenda here today. As you can see, we've continued the recent practice of providing you a written executive director's report. I think given the lightness of the agenda, we may point out a few things verbally here to start off the meeting before we move into our vote around the benefit procurement for the health and pharmacy benefit consultant, a really important piece of our work heading into the next health and pharmacy benefit procurement. We will hand it over then to Erica Shabelli, our Deputy Executive Director, to walk through in a little more detail the engagement strategy that we've been discussing generally in the past. Before we proceed, we want to present that all to you. And then for the first time in a few meetings, just given the timing of our prior meetings around plan design and rate development, we will have a full formal CFO update. So that is the agenda for today. Next slide. And next slide onto calendar, please. So you'll see we've got a little bit of a different format for the calendar. We're just trying out a little bit of a different visual to try to capture efficiently the work that we are doing today, but also how it fits into the context of our last few meetings, and then also looking ahead to the fall. We will be populating the fall agenda with some additional items as we go forward. But today we will I've already noted the items we're taking up today, but for May and June, we will be digging in a little more specifically to the core of our cost drivers and starting to lay the groundwork for the development of our behavioral health strategy, and as well as providing you the first of many additional regular updates around our ongoing engagement strategy. In June, we've got a busy agenda. We will have, as we do annually, our colleagues from the Health Policy Commission and Center for Health Information and Analysis, who have recently or will have recently completed their cost trends hearings and developed a preliminary report. And we will also be reporting back to you on our annual enrollment, which by that point in June on the 17th will have concluded. And we'll circle back on a discussion that we began in earnest back in February around diversity, equity, and inclusion before we break for the summer months. I will note, just for, based on feedback from members of the commission, we will be addressing a few other topics over the course of the year. I think there's some interest in understanding a little more texture to our experience with the health benefit buyback program, so we can develop some metrics for a review there, as well as a report out on the participation in our FSA plans, both the health FSA and the dependent care FSA, how many of our members are using them, to what level are they electing that benefit, how are they using the benefits. So we want to get a little bit more deeper understanding of where we are with those programs. In the fall, you'll see we have the next round of the plan audits. I think as part of that, we are also planning to circle back with you on the last round of plan audits. I think there was interest by several commissioners for us to present kind of how that all resolved the issues that were raised as part of that prior plan audit. So we will wrap that in as well. And we've also concluded some audits of our PBMs, still under review at the moment, but we'll be back with more information on those as well. So just to give you a little sense of what we have in the pipeline. I will also note here, of course, the obvious, which is that we are now a little bit more than a week into the annual enrollment period, a very busy time for us. And that will, conclude as we head into May. So that's a little sense of where we are in the calendar. Happy to take any thoughts or comments on that before I move on to the rest of the director's report. See, Commissioner Kleinert has a hand up.
Thanks, Matt. My question was about the fall, when you said you would follow back up. That's when we'll hear about those pharmacy rebates from those plans that weren't paying them to us. You'll have follow up to us about that?
Yes, that and other issues that we reported to you. I want to say it was back in the January meeting or December meeting when we presented the findings of the audit. Yes, that's the plan, as to those issues that were raised, how did they resolve through our subsequent work with the carriers.
Great, thank you.
So go ahead, Bobby.
Matt, I have a question regarding the survey. I know we had talked about that last meeting about getting that ready or getting that out this quarter. So I was curious as to the what's going on with that, what the status is of the survey.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I would, we will actually touch on that a little more detail when we get to the engagement plan and the calendar and timeline as it relates to that. But I will say briefly at this point that we are moving forward with the conjoint member survey. We're on a little bit of a slower timeline than I was anticipating when we last discussed this. the timeline, and I suggested first quarter. So we've had some, we had actually a meeting, a really productive meeting earlier this week with our partners at Deloitte, who are the vendor for this survey, and are sketching out a new timeline that we feel confident is doable and will provide data and insights about our members' priorities in time to inform the creation of our strategy for the procurement and through that, the development of the health benefit and pharmacy RFR. So what we had really tried to do was to align the survey with the rest of our engagement strategy. And I think when we get to that portion of the agenda today, that'll make a little more concrete sense to you all. But that's where we are. We are, and as I've said before, we are committed to doing a survey of our members. Conjoint clearly is the ideal mechanism for us to do that, at least for our active members. And we have a plan in place to get that done.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Matt around the survey? All right. Great.
On to the, if there's no further questions, on to the next slide. And one more, please. So, yeah, I'm sorry, leave it there, that's fine. So in terms of the executive director's written report, I do want to pull out a few specific items. Under communications, legislation, and municipalities, you'll see a written update in the report. One item I will note as a sort of late-breaking update is that the House Ways and Means Committee did release their budget proposal yesterday. On our first review of the House Ways and Means budget, we see that it tracks closely, if not identically, to the governor's budget proposal for the GIC. So we see no reasons to be concerned about where that may be going in the legislature, but we will continue to follow that closely. And then, of course, we have two human resource updates that I think are worth pausing and spending a moment on. One is, and I think I've informed the commission in writing of both of these recent and impending departures from the GIC. One is that Linnea Walsh, after 3 years as our communications director, stepped down earlier this month. And Linnea was a really valued member of the team who led a wide range of communication projects that have been really critical to the GIC. She supported the initial phase of the very successful rollout of the My GIC link modernization effort, and has really helped us to think in a digital first way across all of our communications strategies, leveraging email as opposed to snail mail when we can, using social media, digitizing key documents like our annual report and our benefit decision guides. And she also stepped in when we needed her to kind of pick up our relationship with the with Optum, our employee assistance program. So she will be, her friendly sort of positive presence around the office, even though it was all virtual since I've been here, will be really missed, and we want to thank her for her service. Secondly, we have Denise Donnelly, who recently announced her retirement from the GIC since June of 2019, and this is soon after our last benefit procurement. Denise has led all of our procurement strategy and really built a solid team that I think the commission has had an opportunity to see in Cameron McBean and Janine Dewar to help ensure that we have smooth, productive relationships with all of our vendors, and to monitor them and watch them closely to make sure that they perform as we expect as we expect that they will. She's been generous in compliments and praise for carriers when they've done well. She's been direct and clear with carriers when they have missed the mark on occasion. She always sets very high standards for herself and for her team and for everybody that she works with, including myself. But she's always knows how to laugh and has a wonderful sense of humor, which I think is has been a great balance as a contributor to the team. We take our work seriously, but not ourselves too seriously. So I don't want to miss the opportunity to acknowledge all of her contributions to our work and really how well she's positioned us with the team that she leaves us with to be very successful in the coming procurement. So Denise retires at the end of the day today. So I want to wish her all the best in retirement. I fully expect that she will be as busy in retirement as she's been working for us. So Denise is with us. I do want to at least give her the opportunity to say a word, and for you, Madam Chair, and others to say a word on this or Linea's departure from the team.
Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate that. I want to thank all of the commissioners for having had the opportunity to serve with you. I've been so impressed with the caliber of contribution that you all make and the way that you guide the GIC. It's really been an honor to be able to learn from all of you, and just a joy to work with all of you. And I have to say, I've been so impressed with the professionalism of the staff at the GIC, how hard everyone works and how committed they are to the GIC's mission. I'll miss everybody. So thank you very much for having had this opportunity.
We're going to miss you so very much. How about a round of applause for Denise, everybody? Real or fake? I think we can put these up, right? We got this too. Yay. So Denise, you have come into the commission and demonstrated your ability to mix your expertise, your deep expertise in private, and it was sublime how you transitioned to the state and to the work that is done in government, and that's not easy to do. I know that. And I really appreciate the service that you've provided. And I'm glad that you acknowledged how hard the staff at the GIC work, because I absolutely know that as well. So you will be missed. I will miss you. I am sad for me and for us, but I'm certainly thrilled for you. So best of luck. I'm glad you're at this meeting so we can acknowledge you. It's recorded in perpetuity. Just remember that.
Thank you, Valerie.
And all the best.
Thank you so much, Valerie. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
So I see Toby and Bobby and probably some others want to say a few words.
Well, I'll speak. I wanted to, first of all, wish you much luck and happiness on your retirement. And I just wanted to say I've bombarded you in the last, year and a half, almost 2 years, and you never failed to respond to give me such knowledge and understanding about certain facets when I would frantically email you that about something a member had contacted me about. And when I needed sort of an immediate response. You have been wonderful in that regard, and I learned so much from you over the last 2 years, and I wanted to thank you and thank you for the wonderful work that you've done for the GIC. It's been it's been a terrific sort of turn for the GIC, bringing us into the 21st century anyway. And so I cannot thank you enough. It's been a wonderful experience. And so thank you. I will miss you.
I'll miss you too, Bobby. Thank you for those kind words. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I might have been wrong that Commissioner Choate had a question. So we can move on. But thank you again, Denise, and we wish you only the best, and certainly keep in touch.
I will. Thank you again.
Yeah, we may find some ways to keep her involved in a few things around here. I wouldn't be surprised.
That
So,
does happen at the
Yep.
commission. It does.
all right. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and Denise again. Thank you. So moving on to a few other things that I want to flag in the annual report. I think it's worth stopping for a moment to hand it over to Paul Murphy to say just a few words about where we are in annual enrollment. Of course, there's not a whole lot for us to say because we're only a week and a half, actually a little bit more than a week in. But I do want to give Paul an opportunity to say a few words about what we're observing, and commissioners, if you have questions. Paul?
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, commissioners. As Matt said, we've entered the busy time of year for us. Annual enrollment is off and running, and we wanted to share some 1 week statistics with you, even though it's early. We will have the full annual enrollment report as we normally do in June, but 1 week into annual enrollment, I can tell you that last week alone, we took 2,794 phone calls, of which almost half of those calls went into our retirement unit for questions regarding turning 65, retirement, Medicare, and life insurance. So it's a busy time. In addition to that, as you know, we mailed out 260,000 benefit statements in March in preparation for annual enrollment, and our members have returned close to 4,400 statements back to us asking them to update their information, email, phone number, etc. So we're in the process of processing them during the month of April. And we also received 1,167 online inquiries through our website where people can contact us directly through our website and ask their questions rather than call in. So it's a busy time. I would encourage everyone, if you have a moment, as well as our members, our annual enrollment site is up and running. It's on our webpage. There's a yellow banner. There's a lot of information on the website. The guides are in there. The rates are in there. There's a lot of information for our coordinators. And there's also a new section on virtual benefit fairs from all of our vendors. So there's some presentations and recordings on there from our vendors so that they can get information to our members regarding annual enrollment. So it's up and running. It's a busy time. And if you have any questions, let me know. And again, the full presentation will take place in June.
Thank you, Paul. If there are questions there, now would be a time to ask them. I will note, if folks want to think about a question, just that I want to thank Paul and his team and the operations team. This is sort of it's always busy here, especially in his side of the shop. It is uniquely busy right now with so much else going on outside of annual enrollment. Happening in the background, we've touched upon it a few times in prior commission meetings, is all the work that's going into the next phase of our modernization efforts with the creation of our member-facing portal. I could say a few words about that a little bit later on, but that's now in user acceptance testing, and we'll be moving to training and some go live in the coming months. It's just an enormous investment of time and energy, and Paul and his team have just been fantastic, and John Harney and the IT team, everybody who's involved in that project have just, it's outside of their day jobs, so to speak, but they continue to do their day jobs to a very high level of excellence. So I just want to acknowledge all the work that's happening on that side of the shop.
No, I agree. Go ahead, Bobby. I see your hand is up.
Thank you. Thanks, Valerie. Paul, I was just curious. I know it's really premature, but I was curious if you've seen any movement away from Harvard and Tufts because of their merger.
I do look at, we have annual enrollment reports that I can look at on a daily basis, Bobby, and so far we've received almost maybe 100 change forms, so it's really early. And that includes, people enrolling for the first time, as well as some people that definitely are changing plans. So it's less than 100. We do get a lot of information in enrollment for our retiree dental plan too. So we have, quite a bit of those applications coming in, but it is early, but people are submitting changes. And we've also included on the webpage a link to the My GIC link where people can make their change online and submit it to us for open enrollment. So it is happening. Changes are coming in. I expect most of them, as usual, come in towards the end of April, beginning of May at the end, when people make their final decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much to you and your staff for all the hard work. It's very, very difficult, particularly with, being on, a virtual platform and not being out there. So I really appreciate, on behalf of, my members, I really appreciate the effort that's gone into this, and it's been so seamless. And I speak just for myself because I'm a member too. So I know it's great. And the information that's been disseminated has been terrific this year. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Bobby.
It's an agency-wide effort, Bobby. So, to get it ready for our members. So a lot of work from everybody, but we're glad, and I will pass the information in your praise to my staff. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Bobby, for mentioning that. Paul, my question is about the employees who are taking those 2,700 calls, and I'm guessing that's a pretty big spike in calls. It's virtual. What kind of support are you providing to them? How are they feeling in their ability to do their job remote? I'm sure there's some things that you're doing as the manager to support them and overseeing it from a leadership perspective. I'm just wondering if there's anything new that you've brought to these folks, given, it's our second year doing remote instead of what everybody looks forward to hearing about are the health fairs.
I would say, Commissioner Sullivan, that, we do meet regularly with the staff and the supervisor to see how things are going. Phones are always busy. Monday, Tuesday, the busiest times. Friday seemed to be a little light. But, one thing we did learn with this virtual is that we were able to move the work around within the operations division. So when we have a retirement unit that takes as many calls as they do, we can shift some of the work and processing that comes in to other members of the operation team to help with that. And that has really helped the staff as far as not feeling overwhelmed. We have a very robust staff and a lot of cross-trained so that we can move work around where people like in data entry can take over a lot of the processing and the members can focus on the phone. So it's worked out well.
Oh, nice. Good. And I'm sure that the staff like that they are getting, more exposure to doing different type of jobs, with the cross training. So that's great to hear, Paul. So thank you.
Yes. Yep. They're well on board, and a lot of the staff, without going into what Matt's going to talk about on our new employee portal, the user acceptance is not only outside with the coordinators, we have a handful, but we have a good chunk of our staff going in so they get to see this portal now and walk through it and see the different aspects of it, because that will change some of the jobs going forward when we roll out this portal too, but they get to see it firsthand,
Good.
which is good.
Yeah, that's terrific. No, thank you.
Yep.
Please, the staff, I just want to make sure they know how much they're appreciated. So
Yep.
I know you'll pass that on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just two quick things to say. When I acknowledge Paul and his team, I should always acknowledge Donna Wortman, Assistant Director there as well, who's a extremely valued member of the team. But I also want to note too that, one of the things that will happen without any fanfare, it's already happened without any fanfare because it went so smoothly, was we switched over our entire phone system just a matter of weeks ago in preparation for our move to our new space in June. And we did it in a way that allowed us to address, the inevitable kinks in such a transition to a new system, but it's really designed specifically to give our staff the right tools to be able to do this work in a remote fashion. So again, it's another thing that you won't ever hear about because it happens so smoothly and never makes the papers or anything like that. So I just want to acknowledge that. I'm going to skip over COBRA down to the Fallon Health announcement just because it does relate at least partially to the annual enrollment activities that are ongoing. I did email the commission, or we included information in the packet about the recent announcement from Fallon Health about their essentially departing the commercial marketplace with a small exception of continuing to serve some members with subsidized coverage through the connector. They're focusing primarily on their Medicaid and Medicare business and the work that they do really well around dual eligibles for both Medicare and Medicaid. So for us, that means no change for members that are currently enrolled in Fallon. It means no change for those enrolling in Fallon for continued coverage through this annual enrollment for the coming fiscal year, but it does mean that next year's annual enrollment will not feature Fallon as an option. So for us, that means, number one, making sure that we communicate clearly to our members about what this means and doesn't mean. It also means working closely with Fallon to make sure that there's no disruption or to service for those that remain in their plans, but also a fair amount of work that we've already started scoping out about how we manage the 6,000 or so members who are in Fallon plans transitioning to other plans at the end of the coming fiscal year. So there's a fair amount of work ahead. We've provided some information on our website about it and to our public information unit. We've gotten a small number of calls when the news came out, but we will continue to support our members with accurate and timely information there. Maybe I'll pause on that item before I close out on the two other items. If there's a question, I see my vice chair has a question.
Yes. How many members are enrolled in Fallon? I know that might change, over the course of open enrollment, but I'm curious as to how many members we currently have.
Yeah, I may have misstated that. Paul, where are the current numbers?
Current members, Bobby, for subscribers, just the subscribers, is 6,897 between Fallon Select and Fallon Direct, the two plans.
Okay, thank you.
And how publicly is Fallon communicating with our members about next year, if at all?
Well, I think that will be a little premature about what it means for next year. I think what we and they have focused on is making sure that there's an understanding that there's no immediate impact, particularly in the annual enrollment, because the announcement comes at that time. So I will say I've been in regular touch with Richard Burke, the CEO. He's expressed his commitment to working closely with us to make sure that we communicate clearly to members and prospective members and to minimize disruption. So there's a lot more work still to come, but I think for the short term, we want to send a kind of a clear message that nothing is changing in the immediate term. This does, of course, mean that with this announcement and the merger of Harvard Pilgrim and Tufts, we will head into the next procurement with 4 of our 6 incumbent carriers, a notable development.
Yeah, it is notable. Hey, Rebecca, I see you have your hand up. Hi there.
Hello. Yes, I just wanted to add that the Division of Insurance does review the notices that Fallon sends out to its commercial members. Now, the GIC is self-funded, but my expectation would be that the notices would be very similar that Fallon will provide to the GIC membership to those that are reviewed by the Division of Insurance. So there should be no concern about the communication being clear when it comes out.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, for that. And it's probably worth being in touch with you all as you review those materials to make sure that we're essentially establishing the same expectations for communications to our members. So thank you for that.
Sure.
So we're dedicating a little more time to the director's report here than we would typically do. We've got the time to do that. So the last two items I want to note are the listing of COBRA and the dependent care assistance plan, which is our FSA for dependent coverage for dependent services. These are both, there are two elements to the American Recovery Act, which is the federal COVID Relief Act, recently enacted, I think in March. The COBRA coverage essentially extends full premium coverage for eligible individuals for the period of time between April and September. I think I might ask Andrew to say a word or two about this, but let me just mention the dependent care assistance plan as well. So the act allows individuals who have enrolled in the dependent care assistance FSA to increase their contributions to this FSA for the calendar year 2021. That is complicated for us because we have our FSA on the state's fiscal year. So when we're contemplating providing some additional flexibility to our members here, it is adjusting an annual maximum for a 6-month period, which is a little complicated. And I think add to that the fact that we don't yet have final regulatory guidance from federal agencies. It's going to take us a little bit of time to sort through a path forward on this. I would say the same to some degree on COBRA, where the initial guidance was not super applicable to purchasers like the GIC. So we have a little bit more work to do on both of these before we come back to the commission. On the dependent care assistance plan change, we do have to have a commission vote on a change in that benefit before we can proceed. So I would expect that we would be back in May on both of those topics. We've been getting a number of inquiries on both through our operations unit. So this is complex stuff. So I want to pause and see if there are questions.
Bobby has her hand up.
Yeah, so regarding DCAP, does that mean if it can only be increased for 6 months, does that mean the expenditure? What about the expenditures? Do they have to occur? I know it's a credit. So how will that work? I guess in practically. Like, how would that work, and how would one explain that to our members that, would sort of make sense to them, and whether, because increasing the contribution is increasing the deduction, right?
Right.
And so what is the benefit in essentially for half the year? What happens the remaining? What happens the 6 months following in FY22? What about those 6 months?
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly?
great questions, Madam Vice Chair. I see Andrew with his hand up, and and the combination of him and Cameron McBean on Denise's team are probably the right ones to answer that. I think you're raising a lot of the questions that we have still that we need to get answers to, but I turn it over to Andrew and Cameron to provide any more context.
Sure. As you said, I think that those are the very questions that we're trying to get answers to, because what the federal government did is it only this is a calendar year program. It is only for 21, and it has tax consequences. So it's not clear how we could implement it. And it also overlaps, and there is some suggestion that the reason for the federal government to have done this was because of the extension of prior grace periods. There are people without any changes who will have had the possibility of already having $10,000 in essence in the bank they need to spend, and that could have created tax issues for them. So this may be a way to cover the tax consequences of the prior extensions of grace periods when people could put aside $5,000 in each year. It's not clear. And it is really problematic on how to message this, how to protect members from not over withholding. So that's why we're not moving forward right now. We're trying to get more guidance and figure out if it's even worthwhile bringing something to the commission that is workable. We have to see what's workable. I hope that answers.
Yes, thank you. No, thank you very much. Thanks.
All right, I don't see any other questions. You can move on, Matt.
All right, I think that concludes the executive director's report. I will note the COVID-19, there is some information in the packet about vaccine statistics for our members. You'll note the caution, however, that the data that we have in claims for COVID-19, we think significantly understates the number of vaccines that our members have actually received for a variety of reasons. But I think that concludes the director's report for me.
Okay. All right, terrific. Thanks.
Thank you. So if I may, Madam Chair, so we're going to move into the benefit procurement and vendor management section of the meeting. And I want to thank Janine Dewar on Denise's team for leading this procurement, and of course for Denise for her leadership and guidance of this. And Denise did say that this was something that she wanted to get kind of concluded before she left. So we appreciate her sticking around for that. This is a hugely important contract for the GIC. It plays a pivotal role in a variety of key work streams for us. I think we understand that they're an important thought partner and researcher and policy thinker with us as we head into the next health and pharmacy procurement, but they also provide a variety of ongoing, really critical services to us in evaluating plan design changes, helping us develop rates, to oversee our vendors. We've heard from Vince Kane, in addition to the rest of the team, Vince Kane on a number of actuarial issues and members of his team, but also Devin Shaw on pharmacy. They help us to manage our PBM contracts. They did the audit of the PBMs for us. So it's really important contract for us. And so I do just want to note here too, and may have Andrew chime in if he has more to add, just to remind commissioners that this is still a live procurement. And while we can have general conversations about what is in the confidential staff recommendation report that we circulated, we have to avoid talking about kind of specific numbers or dollars within that report. Andrew, I don't know if there's more that you want to add to that.
No, it's just a reminder that the procurement's not over with this vote. We still have to reach a contract, and as recent experience has shown, sometimes that doesn't work out as well as we would like. So we always want to be mindful that we don't want to do anything here to undermine the completion of the actual.
But we do
procurement
welcome
process.
questions, and we'll be happy to answer them to the degree that we can. So with that, I'll turn it over to Janine.
Good morning, commissioners. Next slide, please. So our health and pharmacy consultant procurement team was made up of 7 members, including 1 non-voting member. Next slide, please. Our current health and pharmacy consultant, as well as Towers Watson, their contract, their contract length was 3 years with 2 options to renew for 1 year. The initial 3-year period of their contract ended June 30th, 2020, and it was renewed for 1 year, which ends June 30th, 2021. The contract with Willis Towers Watson only included 1 health and pharmacy carrier procurement, which was carried out for fiscal year 2019. So the GIC seeks to procure a health and pharmacy consultant to assist with the strategy in the FY24 health and pharmacy carrier procurement implementation and management effective July 1st, 2021. Next slide, please. The RFR was posted on Combis on November 16th. It was a combined bid, which means that firms could bid on health consulting only, pharmacy consulting only, or both. The bidders conference was held on December 18th, and the submission deadline was February 10th. GIC received 7 complete submissions. 5 were for combined health and pharmacy consulting. 1 was for health consulting only, and 1 was for pharmacy consulting only. Next slide, please. So following initial scoring of the technical proposals, cost proposals, and SDP commitments, 4 firms were invited to interview for combined health and pharmacy consulting. The interviews took place between March 8th and March 18th, and best and final offers were due on March 23rd. So the bids were very competitive. Willis Towers Watson scored highest in all categories. They really knocked it out of the park. Next slide, please. So our procurement team requests that the commission approve Willis Towers Watson as the apparent successful bidder for both health and pharmacy consulting engagements, and to move to the next highest scoring bidder if contracting is unsuccessful.
Thank you, Janine.
Before we move to the a vote or a discussion, I do want to offer Denise an opportunity to say a word about the procurement, and to say a word if there's anything more that she wants to add.
No, just to amplify what Janine said, that we were very impressed with quite a few of the bids. As she explained, we had 4 really strong finalists. And it was really the case that in every category, with respect to every attribute that we scored, that Willis Towers Watson just knocked it out of the park. It was a superlative bid. They were not complacent. They didn't take the business for granted. And they did a really good job. So I think the commission should be assured that they are by far and away committed to serving the Commonwealth and the GIC with the very best that they have to offer.
Oh, nice. That's terrific. I like that. Thank you. Commissioners, do I have any questions or any discussion around this? Well, I then want to request a motion that we approve Willis Towers Watson as the apparent successful bidder for both health and PBM services engagement, and we'll move to the next highest bidder if contracting is unsuccessful.
So moved. Second.
Okay, terrific. So at this point, we'll pass it over to our general counsel for a roll call. Andrew, I am a yay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vice Chair Kaplan,
Yay.
Designee Roder,
Yay.
Designee Butler,
Yay.
Commissioner Shabbat,
Yes.
Commissioner Chapdelaine,
Yes.
Commissioner Choate,
Yes.
Commissioner Clenard,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Garon,
Yeah.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Yay.
Commissioner Gentile. Do we lose
Joe?
Joe?
Mm.
I'll go back. Commissioner McEnany,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Seneko,
Yay.
and Commissioner Sullivan,
Yes.
and Commissioner Gentile joined us again. It looks like he's still connected.
I think he's
But he's on
frozen.
mute.
And I think he looks frozen, Andrew. So
Okay.
can we come back to him?
He can, if he wants to raise his hand when he's back on.
Okay.
He can't hear me, so it won't help. Yeah, we can go back to him. But
Okay.
right now, the motion is unanimous with all who have voted, and it would pass by majority vote anyway.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Well, I want to thank the team that did the procurement. I can't imagine it was easy. And I want to thank Willis Towers Watson for believing in the work that the GIC does and putting such effort into the bid. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you to the procurement team. And just to echo the thanks to Willis Towers Watson for, as Denise noted, just knocking it out of the park. The ability to continue to work with them without interruption as we head into what you will soon in a moment see as a busy engagement and subsequent procurement calendar will be really helpful and key to our success. So thank you to Jeff Levenshires and the rest of the team for their work.
Okay, good. Is Jeff on to say a word? I don't know if he's able to through the live stream, but just know, Jeff, we appreciate it and we'll look forward to working with you and your team.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So moving on to item 4 on our agenda, the engagement strategy. So I'll just tee this up quickly and hand it over to Erica Schabelli, our Deputy Executive Director. You'll recall last September, Denise and I provided the Commission a high-level overview of the coming procurement process and our first look at the timeline, again, for the FY24 coverage. And we talked generally about the importance of building a robust effort to engage with our stakeholders, with our members, policy experts, academics, industry players, vendors, colleagues in state and local government, and many others. So once we release the health benefit and pharmacy benefit RFR, as I think the Commission is very well aware, the procurement rules really prohibit us from doing this sort of engagement work. So Erica, since she joined us in December, has led our work to put together what I think is a very ambitious plan to front load this process with as much engagement as we possibly can. So before we launch that effort in earnest, we wanted to come back to the Commission to lay out our plan and our timeline, be clear what our objectives are, and to solicit feedback from the Commission on this plan so that we can adjust it accordingly. So with that, I will hand it over to Erica Schabelli, our Deputy Executive Director.
Thanks, Matt. Good morning, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and Commissioners. I'm excited to update you today on our engagement strategy relative to that upcoming procurement that Matt just mentioned. You can go to the next slide, please. So first, I'll start off with a really high-level overview of the timeline for the course of the upcoming procurement. We're currently in year 3 of a 5-year contract with our plans and PBMs. And while you can see that the new coverage wouldn't take effect until July 1st, 2023, we're already beginning the work to get us to that point. So the slides that will follow here today will specifically outline the engagement strategy and the development of a strategic framework. And you'll see that noted in that first 2021 box. Next slide, please. So before I go into the engagement strategy itself, I want to highlight why it's important and what our objectives are. Engagement during the strategic development of the RFR will be absolutely critical to our success. We want to bring stakeholders into the procurement process in order to produce the best RFR and resulting procurement that we possibly can. So our objective in embarking on this strategy is really threefold. First, it's to signal clearly to all who are interested that we've begun this process that will lead to the FY24 procurement. Here we are, we're getting started. We want everybody to know and be aware that that's what we're up to. The second is to educate our various constituencies as to what the GIC views as the primary challenges and priorities we face in achieving high quality health benefits that are both affordable and sustainable. And the third is to learn and garner feedback from our various stakeholders and members. First, to understand their priorities through kind of standard engagement, which would be meetings, Zoom for now, hopefully at some point face-to-face. The second would be the conjoint survey that focuses specifically on plan design features. And I know Matt talked about this a little bit before to give a brief update, and didn't know, Matt, if you wanted to add anything.
Just that what I felt strongly about was that the survey going out on its own ahead of this broader engagement framework caused me a little bit of concern, where I wanted people to understand that, so the conjoint survey really is designed to model elements of plan design, which are, of course, a very kind of discrete and knowable list of features of plan design. But I wanted folks to understand that we're not only focused on plan design. I think if one of the takeaways from our recent review of potential plan design changes teaches us is that our ability to really move the needle, particularly on affordability and on premiums through tweaks to plan design or network changes is fairly limited. So this adjusting the conjoint timeline to be part of the engagement strategy allows us to make it clear that we're thinking beyond plan design. And I think, so that was the message that we wanted to send by aligning those two timelines.
Thanks, Matt. So again, under that third objective of learning and garnering feedback, so we have understanding priorities through standard engagement, the conjoint survey, and then also for the GIC's understanding of the landscape and challenges that we may not have anticipated kind of in going into this engagement strategy, really opening it up to hear from other folks about what did we miss. And lastly, to gather ideas of the most effective strategies that may be out there. Anything to add on that, Matt, before I jump to the next slide?
Yeah, so let me just say a word to make sure that people understand how I view engagement. Engagement is not simply learning and listening. It is also, as Erica said, the second element is educating. And part of educating those with whom we're engaging is to help them understand with some texture and nuance the challenges that we face to deliver on our mission, particularly as it relates to affordability. And I think the other element to that is to express the urgency of the affordability challenge, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. But we need to be spending time generating or helping people understand that urgency, that tweaking around the edges with sort of marginal strategies is probably not going to be sufficient to deliver on our mission. So I wanted to make that clear. I would say too that we have been clear internally, and we will be clear as part of these discussions, that when it comes to the strategies we will employ through the coming procurement, at this point, all options are on the table. We've said that to the commission here before. I mentioned plan design changes. We will have to consider those, knowing that their ability to really move the needle is limited. We've, in the past, through the last procurement, there was a proposal to alter the carrier portfolio. That market is evolving, as we know. We will go into the next procurement with only 4 of the 6 incumbents, but that is an area we will continue to look, but we'll be casting a wide net on strategies that we can employ. There are no shortage of good ideas here. I noted on the two recent Health Policy Commission presentations, they were highlighting some ideas that have emerged out of this 1% Steps for Healthcare Reform project, which is coming out of Yale with some really interesting ideas. We're learning from other states what they're doing. So I want you to know that this work is all happening in the background as well, but we are casting a wide net here and interested in ideas that are not currently on our list. I will say, as I think I mentioned under the calendar review, that we will report back to the commission at every meeting as we go through this process. We want to be as transparent as we possibly can about what we're hearing, what we're learning, reactions to the priorities that we're laying out, et cetera, so that we can bring you and the public along as part of this process.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Matt. We can go to the next slide. Great. So with those objectives in mind, the signaling, educating, learning, I want to show you kind of the timeline of the engagement process leading up to the release of the RFR. So not kind of any of the procurement process thereafter, but really focusing in on the engagement and the release of the RFR anticipated in early 2022. Just to note that this timeline isn't concrete, we'll be agile as we need to and make adjustments as are necessary.
Okay, good.
So broadly, the engagement strategy consists of really 3 waves of engagement. The first portion you'll see listed here is really the development of our engagement strategy. We've worked with staff internally as well as some of our thought partners such as HPC and SHIA in state government to really temperature check our strategy. This internal portion, the development, really concludes here today with the presentation to the commission in order to get the commission's feedback on the strategy itself. And there'll be more to come on that later. We have a few specific questions. Once we've received that feedback from the commission on the strategy, we'll go back to the deck that we've been creating and implement any feedback from the commission. And we'll execute really our first round of engagement. This will include all of the groups listed on the previous slide that you just saw. At the conclusion of our initial round of engagement, we'll take all that stakeholder feedback that we learned. We'll take it back to the procurement strategy group to distill it and to inform the drafting of the RFR itself. Following that, the drafting process and really bringing back that information to the drafting team, a further round of engagement will take place. And that's because we'll have a better direction and set of concepts toward which we're aiming for the RFR. And this will allow us to receive more detailed feedback to bring back to the drafting team for completion of the RFR. The final round of engagement will really be kind of a closing of the loop, so to speak, with each stakeholder with whom we've interacted on this topic. One, to thank them for their participation and feedback, and two, to signal where we're headed with the RFR and procurement, such that no one is going to be surprised by what's contained in the RFR. So here, you know, as Matt mentioned, it's really a two-way engagement process. You know, we're educating, we're letting folks know where we're at and what we anticipate, and giving everyone an opportunity to let us know what their priorities are, their concerns, and their hopefully genius ideas, and what we can kind of bring back to the group, and making sure that we're keeping folks informed all the way through each step of this engagement process, so that when the RFR does come out, pretty much there are no surprises. Everybody knows where we're headed. As you can see from the timeline, we're working with a really tight one, and we have a lot that we want to accomplish in a short period of time. But we're confident that we can accomplish the objectives that we talked about before and set ourselves up for success in the upcoming procurement process. As Matt mentioned, we'll keep the commission updated as to our progress in executing this strategy at every commission meeting going forward. And I think that that's critical, obviously, so that the commission knows where we're at, who we're talking to, and the direction we're headed in, but also so that the public knows that there is this engagement process going on. And, you know, if there are folks who feel like, you know, they weren't on our list, we can certainly set up time to chat with them and learn from them as well. So really just making it as public as possible. Next slide, please. So here you'll see these three boxes here, and during our engagement meeting with stakeholders, we want to highlight that these are the three areas that the GIC sees as our procurement priorities. So the first being affordability challenges, second being health equity, and the third being our behavioral health strategy. So Matt will take you through each of these priorities and the challenges as we see them here at the GIC.
Okay, next slide. Thanks, Erica. So front and center to our engagement, of course, as I've already noted, is expressing the appropriate urgency to make meaningful changes to improve affordability, and expressing our interest in addressing the underlying cost drivers as head-on as we can. So a quick review of the last 5 years of premium increases at the GIC, particularly over the last 3 years. Notes that we have a rising trend in premium. We had a few years in the 3% increase. We had 1 year where we had a 0% increase, I think largely due to our success in contracting with our plans and particularly our PBMs. But since then, we saw again back into the threes, and for the last 2 years, we've had increases in excess of 5%. So we are very aware at the GIC of the burden that places on both our members and on the taxpayers, everybody that pays premium. So the core drivers of these increases will not surprise many of you. I was looking back at the minutes from our last meeting where we established premium rates. They are provider unit prices, which continue to increase, largely driven by a consolidated and continuing to accelerate a consolidation in our provider space, particularly hospital systems and physician groups, and the rising cost of specialty drugs. They are a significant driver of particularly our high cost and high severity membership. So those are two issues that we're gonna have to address in some meaningful way to address that cost and value equation that is so critical. At the same time, we have as I noted before, a rapidly evolving healthcare marketplace where you have mergers and acquisitions on both the provider side and the carrier side. You have, of note, I was on listening into the Health Policy Commission's April meeting yesterday. There continue to be evolutions in the provider marketplace, different types of transactions. We have Atrius Health purchased by Optum. We have the Beth Israel Lahey merger, which is only just recently in the rearview mirror. We have Tufts and Harvard Pilgrim merging, but we also have one of our more expensive health systems in the state, Mass General Brigham, with a substantial new expansion where they're upgrading and investing in facilities, but also growing their ambulatory care capabilities into new regions. Some of those are positive developments. Some of those are worrisome developments that we need to keep mind of. And I'd say towards the bottom here, we know that, you know, we have a history, not just us, but just health insurance plan design has gotten much more complex over time, with tiering of providers and tweaking of cost shares and network designs and a variety of other tools that create very complex insurance products for our members to navigate in their own interest and in the interest of keeping premium reasonable. At the same time, we note that, well, two things, that, you know, there's growing evidence that consumers of health insurance don't typically use insurance products the way that they use other products with the same reacting to the same kinds of economic incentives when purchasing care or purchasing insurance. So there's, I think, reason to be skeptical about the ability of those measures to move the needle a whole lot, as I've said before. And we've seen that in our own claims data, where we introduced a $1,500 copay for high-cost hospitals for inpatient services, and it has had very little change in consumer behavior, that they continue to go to those high-cost hospitals, and it generates a lot of friction. So what I think we're trying to do here as it relates to our engagement meetings is to sort of lay out, here's how we see things. These are the priority areas where we're going to focus our attention. We want to gather feedback on whether these are the right things to worry about or whether there are others. And to demonstrate that these are all interrelated interests that we need to balance, right? You can't have broad, unconstrained choice of providers and health plans if we're going to address underlying market power issues on the provider side. So this is to tee up that kind of a conversation. Without going too much longer on this slide, we will add to the data specificity in these specific items as we are able to stand up our Milliman data warehouse and analytical tools. We want to be as concrete and specific with people as we can, more than just to say that these are our concerns, but why and to what degree each of them are our concerns. I think it's probably best to continue on to the next two slides, and then we can pause for discussion. If there are any specific questions on the slide, maybe I'll pause for a moment.
I don't see any questions from commissioners, Matt, so you can keep moving on.
Great, thank you. I apologize, this is sort of presentation heavy, but we will get to the end and open it up for discussion in a moment. So we spent a good deal of time, as I noted, in our February 11th meeting on the topic of health disparities, and in particular, our focus in the near term on race and ethnicity data. we will all at the GIC benefit greatly from a more granular understanding of the impacts of health disparities on our members, and we can only do that when we have good data. I'm encouraged by the early conversations that we've had with the Health Policy Commission and the Center for Health Information and Analysis. Erica noted we've kind of pressure tested some of this with them in the initial development phase. And I'm just really encouraged by the broad coalition that we will be a part of to develop standards for race and ethnicity data. But we have a lot more to learn, and hopefully other strategies that we can use to drive from the lower left of this arrow to the upper right of this arrow. We've heard some really innovative and thoughtful strategies that our carriers have put into place here. So we don't have to wait before we have data to use the tools that are currently at our disposal to address what we know to be, broadly speaking from broad data, the impacts of health disparities. So we want to learn more about that and see what more that we can do. So I'm eager for input from the Commission on how we might, on who we might spend time with on this topic. And then finally on behavioral health, next slide. We've got a lot of work to do here. So we, as a commission, I think back in 2018, 2019, took an initial step to review our compliance through our plans with mental health parity. We made some modest adjustments based on that review. I think a deeper dive on mental health parity is warranted, and I look forward to doing that. We did note as well about the time that I joined the commission that through some review of data that the payment levels from our carriers to providers was in many cases below Mass Health, and we've worked with them to make progress there and increase those rates. We have heard anecdotally from the carriers that they've had success in growing their networks. We are preparing for a series of discussions with the Commission starting in May on some specific data there on what that looks like. But we will have an ongoing discussion with our Commission on this and really look forward to learning more about what we can, other levers that we can push. A lot of the elements of this slide shouldn't be super familiar. Should be familiar to folks. They are the elements that our colleagues at EOHHS and Mass Health have put together to help, really as part of an innovative, thoughtful, progressive, forward-thinking approach to improving the behavioral health delivery system. Again, the GIC by itself is not going to be able to move the entire healthcare system, but we, working in partnership with other payers and our colleagues in state government, should be able to make progress here. So there are some other measures that we will be talking about in more detail. But again, this is our opportunity to say to those with whom we work, in and out of state government, our stakeholders, experts in the field, are we focused on the right things, or are there other things that we should be adding or prioritizing here? I see my vice chair has a question.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I wonder if you have any data. I know that Beacon has stated a number of times, and I've heard it said at the commission meetings, that the provider network has increased. And I'm very curious if you have actual data as to the number of providers that have been added, this past year, or in the last 2 years. Maybe the COVID year is not representative certainly, but I'm very curious what, if we have actual numbers and what those challenges are. And in what areas are we, have the numbers increased, just Metro Boston, what's happening out in the western part of the state, what's happening on the Cape, and in the communities in which substance abuse, right, is extraordinarily high. It's high, it's increasing everywhere, but in those communities, have the number of providers increased, and are we trying to focus on those in those communities?
It's a great question, Madam Vice Chair. I would say that it is something that we are working on actively as we speak. Margaret Anschutz, our head of data analytics, is in touch with our carriers to gather a data pulse precisely on the types of questions that you're raising. Geographical dimensions of access, but also within different categories of behavioral health. We know that there are challenges in access for child and adolescent psychiatric care. We also know that there are, there's a significant impact, as I note here, from COVID on telehealth. So what impact is that having on network relationships with providers? So that sort of data is precisely what we are looking to, that we are working on right now to get from carriers. We're going to have as much as we can of that for our May commission meeting. I would just acknowledge that it's going to take us a little bit of time to provide a full picture, so we're likely to have that discussion over a period of meetings. We're in this phase right now too where, we haven't yet stood up Milliman as a data warehouse. We will have that soon enough, and that will be a huge asset to understand some of these things with our own data. In the meantime, we're having to kind of accommodate the challenges of pulling unique data from the carriers, but we are working on it, is the short answer.
Thank you.
So the last slide, I think we can then get into discussion and some feedback from the commission on this overall engagement strategy. But I do just want to note that, and I think this is implicit in what I've said already in this meeting, but we are not waiting to make progress on any of these three priorities. We have a lot of work that's already underway. Our procurement strategy team meets on a regular basis. We've, as I said earlier, we've made some real progress to get the conjoint survey back on track. We've engaged with Willis Towers Watson now that we have them in place for the next procurement. We can really start to ramp that up, but we've already had some initial discussions with them. And we're working on strategies in the background, as I noted. So there's a lot of work that's underway. Discussions with EOHHS, CHIA, and HPC that will continue and will accelerate in the months ahead. So I just wanted to note that as well. So with that, these are the discussion questions. We certainly should not be limited to these discussion questions. We want feedback from the commission on the general wisdom of what we're doing here, on any specific element of it. We are challenged, as we know, by the fact that the vehicle for our primary strategies to achieve our mission are procurement. And the rules around procurement are just a challenge. So we have to figure out how we accommodate that. So we're kind of building something new here. So I would bear with us. I suspect it's not likely to play out in quite the neat, planned, structured way that we've put forward here. The timeline items that we've noted are not cast in stone. We will have to adjust and adapt as we go through this and as we learn and get feedback. So that's where we're at, and I'm happy to, Erica, I don't know if you have anything more you want to add before we just open it up for feedback from the commission.
No, I'd just say that, you know, while these are the 3 questions that that we put on this slide, you know, these are the 3 things we're most interested in hearing from, but certainly not limited to feedback on these 3 specific questions.
Okay. Oh, I see Toby has his hand up. Go ahead, Toby.
Thank you very much, Matt and Erica. I'm in agreement with the focus areas. I think there's some areas, some things we can do in those areas, and I think balancing affordability with some very other important and meaty topics that we can make progress on, I think is very appropriate, because we, you know, that tends to become a centerpiece of at least the way a lot of us think. So I think that's excellent. As far as the going about this, I think it's a huge undertaking. And I'm not suggesting we shouldn't take it. I'm really murky, and I think you kind of may have alluded to it, Matt, in your mind, where how you get from having, you know, kind of boiling the ocean. You're talking to all these people. These are very, very broad topics, appropriate but broad topics. And how do you get from, you know, that broad boil the ocean down to some very specific things that we want to do, and then how we're going to include it in the procurement to basically affect the implementation. And I'm not, to me, that sounds like a very, very tricky process in a short period of time. I'm not saying you shouldn't undertake it, but I wonder if you have kind of any thoughts on that. Do you agree with me, and what kind of are your thoughts and going forward?
I do agree. One person with whom we talked in the initial development phase described this as insanely ambitious, and I think it does lean in that direction. So I share your concern, and I think part of it will be, you know, as Erica laid it out, we sort of have 3 rounds of engage, and then take back and digest and distill, and then re-engage, and then take it back and distill. We may not be able to do that 3 times. We may not. It may be one continuous iterative process. So yes, I do. There are concerns I have about this. There's just a lot of unknown, because, as I said, we're doing something a little new and different here. Mm-hmm. I'd say the other area where I get a little concerned is that when you open up these discussions and you engage and listen, you also raise expectations that the party with whom or with which you are engaging is going to get everything that they want. So we want to be very clear as we engage with these parties, particularly our stakeholder groups, that we're trying to balance a variety of different interests here. Ultimately, it is the GIC staff who will have to take this back, digest all of the information that we have, and bring it to the commission with an informed recommendation for a path forward. And ultimately, it's the GIC, it's the Group Insurance Commission, it's U17 who will ultimately decide. So, you know, setting expectations will be important. And I will say, and I said this as part of my interview for this position, that in response to a question about whether I'm a risk taker, I think this strategy involves a fair amount of risk. The risk of being led in a direction that you can't anticipate, or or as I've noted, sort of raising expectations higher than you want to or really can deliver on. So it's going to be a challenge, but I think we're up to it, and we're going to, like I said, we're going to adjust and adapt as we go through the process.
Okay, I mean, it'd be interesting to see how it evolves, and kind of, I think that really points to, I think, your timeline slide earlier, which as every meeting you should be kind of informing us of what are you hearing, and are you kind of going, you see falling into any of those traps. And but I think, as I said, I want to reiterate, I think it's important to cast our net of the issues, more broadly than we have in the past, and tackle. We generally try to tackle affordability, and we're trying to tackle 3 very tough issues there. But I think if we tackle them, we can start to make a little bit of progress. So
yeah.
So I'm up for the ride. I just wanted to point out the there's some concerns. That's all.
Yeah, the ambitiousness of it. Yeah, no, good comments, Toby. Anna, I see you have your hand up, and then Tim, and then Eileen.
Great, thank you. First, I just want to thank Matt and the Commission for this really clear presentation of the focus areas. I thought it was really well done. And I agree with the focus, and I agree with Toby that this is very ambitious, but I really do think that these are the 3 big areas, and it's really worth working hard on each of them. And then more specifically on the first slide around affordability, I just wanted to note that there's increasing evidence that there's variation in rates paid for services, not only across facilities and across physicians, but within health plans at the same provider. And so, thinking hard about how to leverage that evidence and think about how to I guess the question is just take that evidence in mind and think about how to move away from the higher rate if possible, where you're not really getting anything for them. And then the second point on consolidation is, again, we're seeing increasing evidence, even in Massachusetts, about how consolidation and not only hospital consolidation, but consolidation between different parts of the healthcare delivery system. So like hospitals and physician groups, for example, is leading to higher prices without real gains in quality. So despite sort of this theory that maybe these consolidations could improve quality in a few different ways, care coordination, for example, we're just really not seeing it in the evidence. And there's more of that coming out by the day. So I'm happy to share more detail with you on that if you want. And on the health equity piece, I just really support efforts to improve the data collection there. And I'm really curious about what the carriers are doing to collect that information on their individual enrollees. Because I think not only could the GIC collect some of that information, but the carriers are really in a good position to do that as well. And so I'd be, if you could ask that question and really understand what they're doing, that would be great.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's helpful.
Go ahead, Tim.
Sure, thank you. First of all, I'm in agreement with the plan. Just as many know, there were a lot of concerns about the last procurement process. So I think this process going forward is a significant change and very much appreciated. In terms of timelines, Matt, and engaging of the stakeholders, when you look at labor, which is where my focus is, there's a lot of parties to get involved. So I'm wondering, in terms of the timeline and initial meetings with labor and educating and so on, have you contacted any of the labor organizations at this point, set up any meetings, et cetera? And when you do, if there are meetings, please make sure that the labor representatives here in the commission are fully aware of when those meetings will be.
Thank you, Commissioner. We've not yet booked those on calendars. We have alerted the variety of labor stakeholders that we have and with whom we've engaged in the past that we are proceeding on with this plan and that we look forward to engaging with them very soon. We wanted them to be aware that, you know, this was coming at this commission meeting, and that we look forward again to meeting with them soon. As you suggest, we will for sure include our labor commissioners in those meetings, and really look for your assistance too on the right strategies to engage with your membership. We want to work with the labor groups. We want to engage with labor membership. I think there's lots of different ways that we can do that. We will still be in sort of the constraints of gathering in person due to COVID. So some of this, much of this may need to be remote, but I think we've gotten used to doing that. We did our public listening sessions, public information sessions using that. So I think there are some really good opportunities to do that. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
So go ahead, Eileen.
Sure. So thank you, Matt. I think it's a great presentation, and I too agree with this strategy. I would say a couple of things though. One, I think the education is critically important for all the reasons that you mentioned, but there is so much transition going on in healthcare and so much consolidation. I think it would be really important to have some kind of reference material or leave behind. So the education, certainly you can make presentations, and that's one key component, but I think just being able to reference something, because it's a lot to digest for people, and I do think it would be important. The other thing I would say is, to the extent we're able, being able to articulate the end goal of all of this would be really helpful for people to accept a lot of the disruption that they'll be anticipating, right? So just kind of understanding, okay, this is necessary to get us from point A to point B, I think would be helpful. So, you know, laying that out pretty clearly would be a good thing in my opinion. The other thing, the point I wanted to make was just with respect to the data. We certainly agree that more data is needed, and just wanted to offer to collaborate, having the Mass Taxpayers Foundation collaborate with the GIC. We're issuing a report on racial disparities. Healthcare is one of the focus areas. We would agree that there is a lack of good data, and think it's really important that stakeholders have the conversation about what would be useful data, so that ambitiously, maybe we could have a common set of metrics to measure, but at least have that discussion as we try to move forward. So happy to have a further conversation offline about that.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. I will note that as part of our preparation, we have created a kind of a leave behind deck that we want to use consistently with all of our meetings. It does include some of the materials that we've presented here today, but there are we've wanted to assume in that deck fairly limited understanding of key facts, right? So that we can, you know, I'd rather have much more in there that can educate people that don't know some of those kind of basic facts, and just refer to them. So it'll be a robust deck that we will add to and evolve over time as we get more data. So I share your notion that, you know, being as concrete as we can about educating people is really important. So we're going to do that. Thank you.
I see Anna has her hand up again.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. I just realized I forgot one point, which I just wanted to clarify, which is that, you know, all this effort to increase affordability, you know, through maybe paying lower rates without loss in quality, it doesn't only make it affordable for members like at the point of care, but it translates back to lower premiums and frankly lower taxes for all of us who pay taxes in the Commonwealth. And so I think making that connection for people can also be helpful to really understand the trade-offs and potential benefits, both immediately and, you know, in future when we have to redo premiums every year.
Yep, very good point. And that is a section of our engagement deck that we have the opportunity to, we have great data sources that exist outside of us right now at the GIC where we can make that case.
I think that's a good point. Thank you, Anna. Bobby, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead, Bobby. Are you on mute?
Yep, sorry about that. I just wanted to echo what my fellow commissioners have said, which is that I'm in favor of sort of grand ambition. I think the timeline might be a little aggressive, but I am very much looking forward to this change and becoming more involved in these areas, because we have never explored as a commission previously any of these areas. This is not new, certainly. A lot of the issues that we're going to focus on, like you know, health disparities, are have been around forever, right? And now we're looking at these areas and affordability in a different way than we have previously. And as a commission, in years past, and some of my co-commissioners who've been on the GIC for a while, I'm sure will attest to that as well, that we have not been, I don't want to say allowed to, but it hasn't been presented in a way that for us to engage so, you know, so actively, and for us to be so involved in looking at the whole, but in each different, you know, facet of it. It's a very exciting time, I think, and with all the changes happening in, you know, healthcare, I think it's a very exciting time for us to be involved, and it's exciting because before we were just sort of observers, I would say. When I first started, when I was first appointed a commissioner, we were, you know, essentially just observers. You know, we'd listen and we'd vote and, you know, maybe ask a few questions, but this level of involvement is very exciting. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, thank you, Bobby. That's great. All right, Matt, in the interest of time and wanting to give Jim Rust the time that always gets taken away from him, how about if there are no more questions, not that these aren't great discussions, but I also know Jim's prepared hard to present some financials to us.
Yep, happy to move on. Thank you, commissioners, for all the feedback. This is the first of many discussions for you all. And I will just note that on our timeline, we have been conservative on the back end about our post announcement of apparent successful bidders, end of the process. We've wanted to be conservative at the outset with the understanding that, you know, we may want to and may need to be able to kind of muscle out some additional time for engagement. So as ambitious as the timeline looks, if it were to change over time, I think we've left a lot of room for it to change by adding additional time on this. I do note that my general counsel has his hand raised. I don't know if there's something he wants to raise before we move on to the CFO report.
Thank you. Yeah, just before Jim talks, I just wanted to note that for the record that when Commissioner Gentile was able to reconnect, he indicated his affirmative vote on the procurement recommendation. So that is a unanimous vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right, on to the CFO report. Next slide.
All right.
And Jim Rust.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Good to see you all again virtually. As you know, we've been sending out these updates with the packet, but I will go through this one briefly and highlight some of the data in the performance that we've had to date. In the packet that was mailed to you, that was updated through February, and since then, the accounting team was able to close March. So what I'm going to present to you today includes all our performance right through March. Next slide, please. So starting with COVID claims, this is interesting. On the chart to the left, the table to the left shows you the monthly paid COVID claims, and it's also reflected on the line chart to the right. And as you can see, there was a significant uptick in claims paid related to COVID during the December-January period, which makes sense when you recall that during the holiday time, we had a significant uptick in cases across the Commonwealth. There's about a 5 to 6 week lag before it shows up in our billing. So I think that's what we're seeing in this case here is COVID claims going up as we pay them for the spike during the holiday season. Next slide, please. And here's the other side of that. So this is medical claims weekly. And you'll see during that same period that COVID claims went up, medical claims went down. And there's probably a lot of logic to that, right? Because people defer care when cases go up. We've seen that in prior weeks. So care that can be deferred is deferred. There's also a little bit of seasonality that happens every year during the holiday period where care goes down just a little bit. But it does show at a very high level that there is an impact on medical claims when COVID cases go up. We do plan on doing a more thoughtful exercise on this subject from the data warehouse probably sometime next year as we get more data into the warehouse as to what kind of care was actually affected by the COVID situation. But just in claims paid, you can see that it was definitely an impact.
Before you move on that slide, Jim, I just want to draw attention for commissioners to a report, I think interim report issued recently by the Health Policy Commission. They did a presentation on it yesterday, specifically on the impact of COVID on the healthcare marketplace and the impact on claims and the financial performance of various actors in the system. So for those who are looking for a broader a resource to more broadly understand the impact of COVID, that interim report and the ongoing work by the HPC is worth following.
Yeah. And you also made me think here, Matt, I should show on the last couple of weeks there, which I believe April 2nd is the last week I have in this chart, you can see medical claims are starting to approach the pre-COVID level, which I think is good news in a lot of respects. Good news that we're opening up the economy and people are getting the care they need, and we're starting to see some normality. So we'll keep an eye on that over the next quarter to see if that continues to be the trend.
Yes,
next slide, please. So as you've seen the slide before. This slide is mostly informational. It shows the monthly paid claims to all our vendors, and again, the shape here would be very consistent with what the weekly claims chart you saw before. But so I won't read through this at all. But this is for informational purposes, so you have this information. Next slide. And this is the employee share. We always commit to showing the employee share of the same claims, and of course, it does show the same proportional pattern as the state share, the employer share, payments to each vendor. And next slide to the chart. So here's the line charts. I haven't walked through for a while, but as you may recall, the blue line shows what our expected spend was each month. So there's seasonality in there, certain billing cycles and whatnot that Catherine Moore and the budget folks try to forecast the year. It's a challenging year to forecast. Obviously with COVID, it's challenging when there isn't COVID, but with the COVID situation, it was more challenging than usual. The red line shows what we actually spent. So you can see in general, spending has been less. We'll get to the numbers on that in the last slide. It has been less than we anticipated. But again, at the end of this, there's definitely an uptick on our actual spending, and we're seeing it go above actually what we budgeted per month. So next slide. And this is the same chart, but showing you what we expect in the next quarter. So the blue line is what we forecast for our monthly spending over the last quarter. And the red line is the same red line as before, which show where we spent to date. So again, we'll update this at every meeting. It just goes, just for informational purposes, this is where we see it going.
Can I just ask a
Next slide,
clarifying
please.
question?
Yes.
Are those blue lines, the projections, are those just based on historical performance, or do they account for?
Oh, sorry. That's a great question. So we look, when we do the budget, so this is, over the summer almost, when we do the forecast, we don't really change the forecast. So we look at historical, we talk to the plans to see what they see in terms of contracting and whatnot, things like that we might want to know would cause. And some of it is very administrative. Is there 4 billing cycles or 5 billing cycles in a month? Utilization, and then health, what I call, from my background, kind of health price inflation, like general inflation that we talked about with the actuary and WTW. So all that goes into this pot, and we work closely with the WTW actuaries on this as well to try to forecast it. So all that goes into the stew. We do tend to not change it during the year. So once we put it out, we kind of stick with it, and we'll just note if there's a disconnect, why it's disconnected.
Yeah.
And this year, COVID and utilization is the big disconnect.
Next, one of the things that makes the line charts, I mean, they're helpful because month to month is helpful. I think certainly this slide that Jim has up is a little more, is able to account for and weed out the normal month to month volatility, right? I think the prior lines really demonstrate primarily that there's volatility on a month-to-month basis for a variety of reasons that aren't particularly meaningful at the end of the day. But I think this is the one that sort of shows the global trends that are most helpful.
No, I'd agree, right? And people who've been on the commission for a while and have seen me do this, I like this slide a lot because it shows the enormity of our budget. It's a very large budget. And normally this is cumulative, like month to month, we're adding up what we budgeted and adding up what the actual spending was. And normally they're right on top of each other because our variance is usually very, even though the dollars are large in terms of percentage of budget, it's very small. But this year you can see that there's a divergence. There's space between the two lines. So there's been a divergence on what we expected to pay and what we've actually paid to date.
Yeah, but there'll be a lag, Jim, and what we're seeing in the last couple of weeks that you showed us, we may see utilization up, and so by the end of the year, it might be married well with budget.
I expect you're right. That's what we're seeing, and the weeklies. We look at it much more closely this time of year, of course, as well, because we're trying to forecast towards the end of the year. But
yeah,
we're hoping that trend continues, not because we want to spend more money, but because we want people to get the care they need, right? That's the important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Using their benefits.
Yeah.
And the last slide, please. So these are the numbers behind the graph. I won't read through this because we've kind of talked about all the drivers on it, but the bottom line is we're right now through March, 109 million favorable to budget for all the reasons that we just talked about. And we will, again, the trend has been, it was higher than this through February is about 117 million. So we spent about 7 million more in March than we kind of expected, if you will, during that period. So we'll see if that trend continues. But as of now, that's where we stand. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
I don't see any questions. We've got a seasoned commissioner group who's seen this before.
Yes.
It doesn't denigrate the work that you do, though. Great work keeping us aligned on our budget and actuals. So thank you, Jim.
And I think it's important that you're aware of where we stand. So that's
no, we like it very much. With great confidence in your ability keeping us on track. So thank you. All right, Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we can go to the next slide, I think that wraps the official agenda. If there are no other business items that commissioners want to raise, although we certainly want to leave an opportunity for commissioners to do that. We have a busy agenda scheduled for our May meeting and our June meetings, so we look forward to coming back to you with some really interesting kind of deeper dives into the cost drivers and behavioral health, and really laying the groundwork in those meetings, and then continuing on in the fall for a greater understanding of the challenges that we'll face as part of the coming procurement. So we'll be giving a good deal of thought to that. As always, I and the team are open to additional thoughts on commission agendas, things that you would like to see us dig into more deeply. We're happy to talk about those with you. So with that, I guess I'd turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Matt. All right, I don't see any other communications across the commissioners. I think at this point then, I'm going to give you 4 minutes back in your day, everyone. So I'm going to call this meeting adjourned, and we'll see you next month. All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.